one of those surprise gifts. We're looking at surprise. God surprises. All year long, we're looking at God surprises. And, I think one of the ways that God surprises us is by pulling us into His story. He has got this story going. And He's got a story for our life, but He's got a kind of a big story going on that's much bigger than that. And it seemed like Jesus kept on trying to get attention of people to pull them into the big story. And He told little stories to get them into this bigger story of what God was up to and what God had planned and purposed. And, a lot of times I think Jesus is trying to get our attention in telling His story, and we are not very good at listening. How many of you are not really the best listeners in the world? And how many of you especially not really good listeners when there's a 5 or 6 year old floating around? Can I have a picture? Let me just say, there were a lot of 5 and 6 year olds floating around. Do anyone know who this is by any chance? Any guesses?
Yes.
Any guess? Who might this be? What's that? No, it is Wes. It is Wes, age about 5 or 6. Isn't that great? That is so much Wes at 5 or 6. I cannot tell you. That look is just Wes at 5 or 6. He was, and like a lot of 5 or 6 year olds, he had lots of stories. And you know how those 5 or 6 year old stories go. They kind of go and then they move from Superman to He-Man to he's becoming He-Man and he's becoming Superman, and then there was a dream and these stories. And so I had the tendency when Wes began telling the story to kind of just, here's the time to tune things out, because I don't know where this is going, and I'm not sure I really care. And then every now and then there would be, I'm off, and he'd be saying, Dad. He would ball up his fist and punch me in the stomach. And then he would look just like that. That's the exact look he would give. It would be this kind of look and sort of a grin, and he would be saying, Dad, I want your attention. I want your attention. And I looked down at him, and he got my attention. And I'm wondering whether every now and then Jesus is doing the same thing. He's balled up a fist, and he's trying to punch us in the stomach, because we have kind of glossed over. We have tuned out. We're not geared for what he has to say. And somehow we've sort of accepted as sort of the norm, that the story that he's telling is just life. It's just going to go on and on. But I think one of the special times that we would tell stories in our house was at meal times. I don't know, it's something about a meal. It's sort of, maybe it's because we're captive audiences, or maybe it's because we're just loosened up a bit. Meals seem to be a place where stories are told. I think you can look at the scriptures and look at where Jesus told stories. A lot of times they had meals associated with them. And in those days, they would not have tables like this. They had what was called tricliniums. I guess that's a Latin term. And actually 3 people would be lying down at a table. And the tables were set up with the guest of honor being the centerpiece. I mean, the host being at the center, and then the guest of honor next to him, and then the second next person, and on down the line. And as people would gather at these gatherings, I suppose they would say that this is a great time to tell stories. And that's exactly what happened with Jesus. He was invited to a gathering, and he saw it as a great time to tell a story, because he wanted to get a point across, and he wanted to get across to some people who had a real hard time listening to what he had to say. And these people were called Pharisees. They had gotten into the rut of religious living. They had sort of begun tuning out anything that didn't sound quite the way they had kind of construed life to be. And Jesus' message for sure was one that was in contradistinction to what they were hearing. Jesus was saying things like, God is all around us and He's right within us. And He was saying things like salvation is free for the taking. Salvation is there for each one of us. Whereas the religious establishment of the time, the Pharisees, the scribes, the teachers, the priests, they were saying God is in the temple. And salvation comes when you pay a fee to have a sacrifice made. It was in order to keep that religious establishment alive that they said we've got to make sure that everyone is in line. So Jesus' message was really not just giving an alternate message. It was undermining the very base upon which these guys were being paid, that their livelihood was at stake. And so Jesus was viewed as the enemy, but he was viewed as an enemy that they wanted to keep close at hand. You know, Machiavelli said this, that you want to keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. You've heard that phrase? This is, and it may have been that same thing. So here they're having a meal. They invite Jesus. And it says in Luke 14, one Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. He was being scrutinized. You ever felt like somebody is just really scrutinizing you and they're not looking to find good things about you, but things that you're not doing the right way? Have you ever felt that way? You're under the gun. Somebody is just there to find out, well, you're doing it wrong. How are you doing it wrong? You ever have at work, you've had that kind of situation? Maybe growing up, your parent has been sort of that way in your life. Gosh, every time my parents are around, I feel like I'm under this gun. Maybe you feel that way when you come to church. Sometimes I have that sort of feeling, gosh, I'm not doing it quite the right way and everybody else has got it all together. This is so easy to fall into that mindset, and Jesus is there. He is the one that they're scrutinizing. He's under the gun. And it says, there in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling in his body. I think the term for this, and I don't know if we have any medical experts, Jim, we do, it was dropsy. And apparently what was going on is you had to drink more and more fluids, and you never felt satisfied. You never could get the fluids taken care of in your body. And so it says, Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in law, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? I think Jesus saw an opportunity to kind of have a visualized parable. This is sort of like a drama being acted out. He's saying, I want to get across a point. I want to wake you guys up. I want to say something to the rest of you. I think you all are suffering from spiritual dropsy. I think you have all kinds of messages of God's love, God's grace, God's forgiveness, God being around you, God working in your life. You're hearing this. I'm sharing it. People are teaching things that are of the Scriptures, and yet somehow the message is not getting through to you. You can't get enough of it. So you're getting swelled up inside, but you're not being satisfied. And this is what was going on. Anyways, Jesus said, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? But they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him on his way. And he's trying to get across a point. And that point, however, didn't sink in. This guy just didn't get it. Sort of like a lot of us probably here right now. Is God speaking to you? Has God been trying to get a message across to you? Has God tried to wake you up in some way, shape, or form? But it's hard to get that message inside of us. It's hard to understand what He's saying. Is that happening? It seems like for Jesus, as the meal continues, He says, gosh, not really. People are now gathering and they're jockeying for position. They're trying to say, well, how can we get to the seat that's closest to the guest of honor? How can we be higher up the ladder in this meal? How can we be more important in relationship to one another? How can we be viewed as somebody who's worthwhile? And as Jesus is there, he's probably seeing all that's going on. I've just shared sort of a living parable. People aren't really accepting it. I want to really get home another point. So he tells another story, and this story is with words. And he says, some people trying to get to the top spot were then told, hey, you have to go down to the bottom one, so you should start out the bottom. Kind of the way Jesus was with his disciples in the Last Supper. They're arguing who can sit at the right or left hand, and Jesus says, I'll tell you what, the real master in spiritual living is the one who serves most graciously. I want to wash your feet, and then I'd like to give each of you a towel so that you can learn to wash one another's feet. But I think what's going on, that message is hard to get inside. As Jesus is sharing, and he kind of leads to a punchline, he says this: "For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." I remember Wes praying one time. He was up here leading worship, and he prayed this simple prayer, and I can't get it out of my head. He said, "Lord, help us to come to you humbly, because that's the only way we can come to you." And I'm thinking, gosh, that's really true. We can't come to him any other way. This is the way we come to Jesus. But those messages, they just seem to somehow come to us, and we say, oh, yeah, and then we kind of move along. Somehow it's easy to say the Scriptures, the message of God is kind of for me, but it's mostly for somebody else. There's somebody else that really needs to hear this. Have you ever done that? I wish somebody else had heard that message. Instead of, gosh, I really need to accept this thing deep inside my soul. So often I want to say, this next story that Jesus is going to share is one that I personally would say, gosh, I don't really relate to. This is for somebody else. But the more I was listening to it, as I was preparing this, the more I'm saying, gosh, this message is for me. Because, the host of this gatherings, probably everybody is saying, hey, this is a wonderful gathering, wonderful meal, really appreciate what you're doing, this is so wonderful. And the host is probably saying, next time I'm going to even have something better. It's going to be steak and lobster. It's going to be, I don't know, surf and turf. It's going to, what else would you have? If it's VBS, it's going to be pizza with pepperoni. It's going to be sausage it's going to be a meat lovers and a veggie special. It's going to be both. You're going to have the best pizza. It's going to be Papa John's rather than Little Caesars. We're really going to live it up. We're going to have the very best at this gathering. And he's saying, I'm going to throw the perfect party. Next time it's going to be the perfect party. And Jesus said, you know what? I want to tell you what a perfect party is all about. I just get this feeling like Jesus is going like this, and people are saying, oh yeah, wow. He's saying words. He's just saying words. And then Jesus says a story. He says, well, and he turns to the host and says, when you give a luncheon or dinner, when you throw a party, do not invite your friends, your brothers or sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors. Thinking about this. Oh, that's a good thing for somebody else. Because guess what? I can never think of a party that I've been throwing that I'm not inviting those kind of people. I mean, those are the kind of people you invite. That's the kind of thing that I invite. I invite my friends. I invite my relatives, my brothers, my sisters, and if there was anybody around here that's rich, you get invited too. I mean, the only reason you're not invited, no one here is rich. This is, but I tell you, that's what I would tend to do. I want to invite the people that will bless me. And Jesus says, if you do, they may invite you back. They may repay you. They may bless you in some way. But when you give a banquet, when you throw a party, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. And I'm trying to think, when the last time I've done this? And I'm saying, I just saying, how many times do we hear the words of Jesus and we say, oh, that's for somebody else? These are just words for, and Jesus would be saying, listen, Pharisees, those who think that this is just for somebody else, this message is for you. Who are you not inviting? And he said, although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. And everyone, if this was a church service, at the end of the message, there'd be Jesus standing at the door, and people would go, oh, that was a wonderful message, Pastor. That was really good message. Wow, that was a wonderful message. I really wish that somebody else would have been there to hear that message. That was really wonderful. And you know, there was a time when I did have somebody over to my house, and I really didn't want them there, and really, I agree with you. That was a good thing to do. It's, you know, and they go on out and bang. It's just lost. So Jesus, I kind of feel Jesus balled up his fist and said, okay. Some guy came along and said, first of all, he said, when one of those at the table heard this, he said to Jesus, blessed is the one who will eat at the feast of the kingdom of God. It was just like saying, it was good message, Jesus. That was really, really wonderful what you had to say. And then Jesus says, okay, one more try. I want to tell another story. A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, come, for everything is now ready. Jesus likes to say, come. Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest, he said to his disciples. What a great message to hear from Jesus. How many of us listen to the words of Jesus to do this? Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. How many of you have been disregarding those words of Jesus? He has spoken to you about this very act. Come. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. To those that are overwhelmed, come, you who are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. Jesus says, come, come, come. But do we hear those words, come? There's this banquet, and this guy's inviting everyone. He says everything is now ready. Actually, apparently there was sort of two invitations. There was kind of the early invitation. You ever do this? You send out this early invitation, and people say, oh yeah, I can come, and let me put it on my calendar. And you send out a second invitation to make sure that they remembered the first invitation. And it was kind of like, oh gosh, I'm really thankful that you sent me the second invitation, because even though I said I was coming, and even though I put it on my calendar, I plumb forgot. And I've had some people say, be sure you remind me that second or third or fourth time. And I'm saying, make your own tickler system. Come on, this is, take some responsibility. Do it yourself. This is, but that was the system. And really the second invitation was when the meal on that day had actually gotten ready, because this is an all-day kind of affair. We're getting everything ready. The meal's being cooked. And when everything's ready, you go around to the village and you say, hey, it's all set. Come on over to the house. Now it's time to come. And it says, one by one, the people Jesus invited had excuses. But they all began to make excuses. The first said, I've just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me. Now, I think that is classic. It's kind of like, how many of you buy make a major investment and never see what you bought? But apparently this is what happened. More likely, he says, hey, this is just a good excuse. Another says, I've just bought 5 yoke of oxen. I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me. Probably. Maybe it's like, I just bought a car. I want to test it out. I want to see what it's like. Maybe the oxen pull to the right or left. I don't know, but they want to test out the oxen. And then he said, another said, I just got married, so I can't come. You can always say, my wife, I have to check with my wife. And, oh, yeah, hey, honey, tell me I can't come. Oh, yeah, I just can't. I just didn't want to come. Jesus said, come. And he said the banquet is ready. Have you ever done that? So you've been invited someplace, you really didn't want to come, and you would say, what excuse can I use that sounds good enough? Have you ever done that? No, Brandon's the only one that's ever done that. This is, okay, Mike, thank you. This is what's going on. And Jesus is saying, excuses. Back in the days when the Israelites were all penned up in Egypt, and they were being in bondage. God spoke to the prophet Moses and said, Moses, I want you to deliver your brothers and sisters out of Egypt. And Moses is in the land of Midian. He is in a desert area. He's in the far side of the desert. He's near Mount Sinai. He is as far away as he could be. He's far away for a reason. He doesn't want to get involved. He's run away. He's trying to hide. He doesn't want to do what God is calling him to do. But God speaks to him out of a burning bush, and he says, I've called you to be the deliverer. I got a ministry for you. I have a ministry for you. I really believe God has a ministry for each one of us. And you're talking about next year in Vacation Bible School. It's so easy to make a commitment for next year in Bible school. But what's really hard is to make a commitment today. It's so easy. Oh yeah, I'll start that. But Jesus or God spoke to Moses, said, I've got this calling in your life, but Moses said to God, well, who am I? Who am I to do this? Great excuse, because none of us are worthy, are we? And then he says another excuse is, well, what is the name of God? They used to understand that God was if we could just get the right name, he would respond. Just like when you call somebody by their right name. If I say Jim right now, I have two people kind of looking at me. They wake up from their stupor. They're looking at, oh yeah, they're Jim. See, I get him. I woke him up right there. This is Jim. This is so. He said, "Well, we need to do that same thing with God. Oh, what's his name? Is it Yahweh? That's the name. That's the right. And I am that I am. I'm the ever present. I'm always around." And then he said, "Well, what if they don't listen to me? And what if people don't pay any attention?" And then finally he said, "You know what? The truth of the matter is, pardon your servant, Lord, but please send somebody else to do this. I really just don't want to do it." That's where so many of us are. I just plain don't want to do what you're saying, and so my ears get tuned out. I tune out what you have to say. Well, Jesus said in his story, okay, all these excuses come back, and the servants come back and reported to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, go out quickly into the streets and the alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. Go out there and bring others in, others that will want to come. Go out there to those that are going to be more receptive. And after they do that, it says, "Sir, the servant said, what you've ordered has been done, but there's still room." Then the master told his servant, "Go out to the roads and country lanes and then compel them. Make sure they come in. Go out so that my house will be full." Now, I think this is a great story. And I've oftentimes said this is a wonderful story. We're to reach out to people who are in need, who are less likely to be invited into the upper echelons of life, and they're part of the lower 10%. They're just, so we reach out in this way, and then they may be more receptive as well to the message of the gospel. So we do this. This is a good thing. And then Jesus says something, however, that I've always assumed is for somebody else, but I'm not so sure if it's not a wake-up call to every one of us who's sitting here right now. I tell you, not one of those invited will get a taste of my banquet. I think Jesus landed a punch as hard as he could. I think it was a sobering statement to people that were very religious, very committed, very devoted. The leaders, where everyone else is much less committed than these people, much less devoted. These people were sacrificing. These people were giving of their time and energy and their finances. These were the people that should have been applauded. Hey, you're the ones that are working at VBS, and you're the good guys in this situation. They thought that they were the good guys. And Jesus was landing a punch because he's saying, you're really not listening. You really haven't listened. You know, Thursday, my Thursday started out, I go to the men's group. There's a men's group at 7:15, so I have to get up kind of early, and Mike is there, and I'm there, and then I needed to meet with somebody because I'm going to be speaking at a pastor's group, and so I was meeting the pastor who leads that group, and I want to talk to him, and because I'm meeting with him, and it's up in the J. Clyde Morris area. I said, well, there's a golf course. It's not too far from there. Maybe I can go from there and play some golf. And so I played a game of golf with Chris Halloran, who's pastor, and I say, well, two pastors together, that's kind of a spiritual act, so we're playing golf. And then I got a text from my wife, and she says, do you realize it's thundering, lightning, and raining? Are you still on the golf course? And so I said, oh, maybe it is. And I get off the golf course, and I said, and I called her, and I said, I'm not that stupid. Only kind of that stupid. I mean, it only started to rumble in the distance when I, holding that club. And so I said, I'll be home right after I stop in at the Breakthrough Center. So I'm driving, and it's raining. And remember Thursday? It's just coming down. It's raining, and it's coming down. I'm trying to go as fast as I can. The traffic's all stalled. When it rains on 64, what it's like. It doesn't matter when it's all, yeah. And then I get off on Settlers Landing. You get off on Settlers Landing and Woodland, and I get off that exit, and there, in the middle of the rain, is this guy with this sign that says, I'm homeless, and he is just getting drencher than drenched, and I'm saying, how can I avoid this guy? And I said, oh gosh, maybe because I'm in the right lane. I'm in the right lane because I wanted to avoid the guy. And then I'm saying, how can I? And then I'm saying, I know if my wife was here, she would be saying, go on over and roll down your window and see if we can help him. But she's not here. It's just me. And I tend to think about things. I don't act quickly. I tend to, and I am thinking. And the more I'm thinking, the more I'm looking, and the more I look at the light, and the more I see that the light has now changed. And I said, well, I better go to the Breakthrough Center 1 mile away. And then I arrive at the Breakthrough Center, and as I walk on in, there are these people praying for people in need. And I'm thinking, well, I just wanted to come here quickly and say, hey, blessings on you all, and go home. And so I wanted to go home. I hadn't eaten anything. I'd been working hard playing golf. And so I said, well, maybe maybe I should go back. And I drove, tried to get back, and then I couldn't see him, and I said, I'm going to go up and do a kind of a big U, but there is no way to do a big U, and the traffic is all gummed up going back the other way, and I just came on home. You know what Wesley used to do when he would punch me in the stomach? And by the way, this is not a mean-spirited kid punching somebody out and trying to take. This is just that playful punch to say, Dad, I really love you, and I really want to connect with you. I don't know if I could have been any help at all to that man, but I do know this. I wasn't listening to the voice of God. I was not listening. And I missed out an opportunity, because when Wes would turn around, he would smile. I can still remember that smile as he'd look up at me and say, Dad, I love you. I so believe that when we eat at the banquet table with Jesus, all he's saying is, I just want to let you know how much I love you. But you've got to listen. You've got to enter the banquet. You've got to come. You've got to listen to what I have to say. You've got to become a part of this thing called the body of Christ. You've got to come alive. You can't just kind of gloss over these things that I'm talking about. You've got to be open to my Spirit ministering to your soul and speaking to you, and respond. It's so easy to become a Pharisee. It's so easy to fall into this message that hey, there is a banquet at table, but you haven't had a bite to eat. You're not eating of the banquet. You're just standing outside and saying, yeah, Jesus, that was a nice sermon. What you had to say was really nice. I wish somebody had been here who it would have done some good for. Because the truth of the matter is, all I'm hearing is words. I haven't really applied what you've spoken to in my life. Now, I just want to say, Jesus is giving us all kinds of opportunities to come to the banquet. This is the only time is when it's not you got one chance, you got all kinds of opportunities. The banquet is offered to us right now. The banquet is yours right now. The banquet's today. This is what Jesus is saying. It's all around you. It's here. It's when you leave. It's when you go home. Do you want to have some of the banquet? You want to taste of the banquet? It's yours. It's yours right now. It's yours right now. Right this minute. The banquet is open to each one of you. Will you come? Will you come? Lord, I just want to say, please forgive that Levite and that priest that walked by that guy who was beaten up on the side of the road. Please forgive them, because if you don't forgive them, Lord, I don't know that you can forgive me. And then, Lord, I just pray that somehow you'll invest within me a spirit that is a lot like you, of that Good Samaritan that reaches out to people who are unlikely and in need and broken. And I just pray that you build that spirit in me of reaching out. I just pray that that's going to be part of my DNA, my transformed DNA. And I just pray that you're not going to give up on working with someone who seems to have a hard time listening. Open my ears, Lord. Please open my ears today to what you're saying to me today, right now. In Jesus' name, amen.